What happens when the owner of a 13-store bakery chain walks into one wearing a fake beard, only to freeze in place after hearing a supervisor berating an employee to tears? That question had never crossed Franklin Dorsey's mind until now. Franklin stood at the rear entrance of the bakery on Jefferson Street, one of his stores that had been underperforming for months. The place was bleeding customers. Reviews online talked about rude service and cold pastries. But what made him decide to go undercover was something simpler. His last 3 emails to the district manager about this location had gone unanswered. That was enough. He pulled the hood of his thrift store jacket tighter around his face. A thick graying beard, fake glasses, and a worn baseball cap hid his features. No one at this location had ever met him in person. Most of the store-level staff didn't even know what he looked like. He'd inherited the company from his father 5 years ago and had focused on expansion, not visibility. He walked in through the back like any new hire would. "Name?" asked a short woman with a clipboard, not looking up. Frank Davidson. I'm the new trainee." He kept his voice slow, casual.
"Oh, right.
"You're the one from the temp agency. Come on, I'll get someone to show you around." The woman's name was Melissa. She was the store manager. Her tone was sharp, efficient, like she was always one step from snapping. She led him into the small break room, where a young girl with flour smudged across her apron was refilling a water bottle. "Madeline, show Frank the ropes." "He's your shadow for the day," Melissa said, without waiting for a reply. Madeline blinked. "Me? Okay." She was probably in her early 20s, thin and pale, with tired eyes that still tried to be kind. She offered a small smile and waved him to follow her. They started with the ovens. Franklin listened more than he spoke. The ovens were old, glitchy. The timers were off, and sometimes the temperature spiked, burning whole trays. "We're not allowed to toss ruined ones," Madeline said quietly. "We just scrape the burn edges and still sell them." Franklin's stomach turned a little. "That's not right." Madeline shrugged. "I know, but Melissa says it's wasteful to throw them out. We're always short-staffed, so it's either that or fall behind." He followed her to the front counter next, where lines had already begun forming. A teenage boy was struggling to keep up at the register. His name tag read Eli. He kept fumbling with a touch screen, apologizing to customers. One older man in line scoffed and walked out. Franklin could see Eli's hands trembling. "Hey, you're doing okay," Madeline whispered to him. "Breathe." Eli gave her a grateful look, then tried again. They made it through the morning rush. Franklin learned everything. The dough came in frozen now, not made fresh like his dad used to do. The staff was down to 5 people on a shift that used to run with 9.
No dishwasher. No backup.
1 person on oven, 1 on prep, 1 on register, 2 on floor if they were lucky. By noon, Franklin's back ached. He hadn't worked a line in years. He reached for a stool to rest when a voice snapped across the room. "Are you kidding me, Eli? You're slower than molasses. This is pathetic." Franklin froze. Melissa had stepped out front, glaring at the teenager who had just dropped a tray of pastries. "I am sorry they slipped." "No, you're sorry because you're useless," Melissa hissed. "You think customers wait around for your screw-ups? You've cost us 3 walkouts today." 3. That's money out of our pocket. You want to cry? Go cry in the alley. Don't do it in front of customers. Eli's eyes welled up. He didn't move. Franklin's jaw clenched. No one else said anything. Madeline looked down at the floor, silent. "Did you hear me?" Melissa barked. Eli nodded quickly and rushed toward the back, face red. Franklin's heart pounded in his ears. He'd seen managers get short with staff before, but this was different. This was cruel. He felt his mouth go dry.
He wanted to say something.
Anything. But he didn't. He stood there, silent, pretending to stack boxes, the fake beard itching against his skin. Melissa turned and walked back to her office like nothing had happened. Madeline leaned in close a minute later. Don't say anything. She'll make your life hell. Franklin nodded, but inside, something cracked. He hadn't just seen incompetence. He'd seen fear, silence, abuse. And now he had to decide what to do next. Franklin stayed quiet for the rest of the afternoon, but his mind didn't. Every second he spent in that building, something else chipped away at the image he'd been sold by middle management. He hadn't expected perfection. He'd expected a struggling store, maybe poor layout or low morale. But what he'd seen wasn't just bad operations, it was a culture that had curdled. By 3 o'clock, the crowd had thinned, but the tension hadn't. Melissa had locked herself in the office, and the rest of the staff moved quietly, like they were trying not to wake something sleeping. Madeline was replenishing the display case with pastries that didn't quite look like they belonged there. Some were overbaked, others clearly undercooked. Franklin raised an eyebrow. Customers don't say anything? He asked, keeping his voice low. She gave a short laugh, then shook her head. They do. Every day. But we're told to smile, apologize, and remind them we're a small business doing our best. That line's taped to the register. Where's the quality control? He asked. She hesitated. There isn't any. At least not here. Melissa decides what goes out. And if we question it, it's insubordination. I got written up last week for tossing a tray of rolls that were raw in the center. Franklin didn't respond. He followed her back to the prep area and saw a man in his 50s working the dough station. He moved slowly, deliberately, and wore a wrist brace. A clipboard with a laminated schedule was pinned to the wall. Franklin stepped closer and scanned it.
Hey.
Is this right? He asked, pointing. You're scheduled 6 days a week? The man looked up.
Yeah.
Been like that for the last couple months. I'm one of the few who knows how to run the laminator. His voice was raspy and tired. Name's Curtis. Isn't that too much? Curtis wiped flour from his forearm onto a towel. Look, I told Melissa I needed a break. She said if I wanted time off, I'd have to train someone to replace me first. But no one stays long enough to learn. Franklin looked around. The kitchen was hot, airless, and the ventilation above the ovens made more noise than airflow. The floor was sticky in places. The ceiling tiles above the sink were stained a deep brown. How long you been here? Franklin asked. Curtis cracked his knuckles. 19 years. Started when the founder still ran things. He paused. Back when we made everything fresh and managers actually worked line shifts. Do you ever see the district manager? Curtis shook his head. No clue who that even is. Melissa says she reports straight up, and we're not supposed to contact anyone above her. Chain of command, she says. Franklin's stomach sank deeper. A timer buzzed. Madeline pulled a tray from the oven and winced. The tops were cracked and sunken. Watch this, she muttered under her breath. She carried the tray to the back office, nudged the door open, and disappeared inside. Franklin waited. 10 seconds.
20.
Then he heard it. I don't care what they look like, Madeline, Melissa's voice snapped. They're going out. You think I'm throwing product because you feel bad? We have margins to hit. Use the powdered sugar and make it look intentional. Madeline came out a moment later, face stiff. Franklin didn't say a word. He just helped her plate them. At 4:30, Eli returned from the storage area, eyes still red. He didn't speak to anyone, just tied on a new apron and started wiping tables. Curtis watched him for a moment, then turned to Franklin. Kid's been here 3 weeks, he said, voice low. He shows up early, stays late, and takes the bus from 2 towns over. First week, Melissa told him not to wear his hoodie because it made him look sketchy. It's 15 degrees outside when he leaves at night. Franklin's jaw tightened. They made it through the next hour mostly in silence, interrupted only by the occasional customer or delivery. Around 5, the register froze mid-transaction. Eli tapped the screen nervously. "It's frozen again," he said, glancing toward the office. "It does that when it's been running too long." "I'll grab Melissa," Madeline said. "No, don't," Eli said quickly.
She'll just yell again.
"I'll unplug it and try to reboot." He crouched behind the counter, careful not to expose the cables to any spills. Franklin stepped in to help calm the customer, who was growing impatient. While Eli handled the register, Franklin boxed up the customer's order manually and offered them a complimentary coffee. The customer frowned but accepted it. Melissa stepped out just as the customer was walking out the door. "What was that?" she asked sharply. "Register froze," Franklin said. Eli was fixing it. "I just stepped in too. You don't comp anything unless I authorize it," she snapped. "If you're going to be here, follow the rules." Franklin nodded curtly. "Understood." Melissa turned to Eli. "You break that screen, you're paying for it. That's a $1,000 system." Eli didn't look up. "It's working now. Then try not to mess it up again." Madeline walked past Franklin, whispering as she passed, "She's worse when the DM's not around. No one checks in on us." Franklin had heard enough. As the sun dipped below the buildings outside, the bakery lights flickered on. The fluorescent hum added to the weight in the air. Curtis was wiping down his workspace. Eli was taking out the bins. Madeline was sweeping near the front. Melissa had returned to her office. Franklin walked to the back hallway, pulled out his phone, and texted a number he hadn't used in months. "Ben, I need you to meet me at the Jefferson store. Tonight. No questions." Ben was his director of operations, one of the few people Franklin still trusted. He waited another hour, pretending to mop, until the staff started clocking out. Ben arrived shortly after close, dressed in a windbreaker and jeans. He entered through the back, confused. Franklin shut the door behind him and peeled the beard from his face.
Ben froze.
"Sir? Don't say anything. Just watch." Melissa stormed into the hallway seconds later, clearly irritated. "Who the hell are you?" "We're closed." Franklin stepped forward. "I'm the owner," he said evenly. "Franklin Dorsey." The hallway fell silent. Melissa's face drained of color. Ben stepped forward. "You didn't get the memo, Melissa? He's been visiting stores." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "Let's talk," Franklin said.
Now.
Inside her office, surrounded by peeling paint and outdated spreadsheets, he laid out what he'd seen. "No accusations, just observations. You've created a toxic environment," he said flatly. "You've ignored quality standards, disrespected your staff, and violated basic company policy on employee treatment." Melissa tried to interject. "They exaggerate. Eli's emotional, and Madeline save it." Ben cut in. "This isn't a negotiation." Franklin stood. "You're done here. Effective immediately." Melissa's voice wavered. "Wait, there's no one to run the store if I leave." Franklin didn't flinch. "We'll manage. You've had enough chances." He opened the door and walked out. Madeline was still wiping tables. Curtis was locking up the back. Eli stood near the sink, unsure if he should go. Franklin called them all over. "I'm not here to make promises I can't keep," he said. "But I can tell you this, what happened here won't happen again. Starting tomorrow, Ben will be overseeing day-to-day operations until we find someone who knows how to lead without fear. You've all been carrying more than you should, and I see that now." No one spoke at first. Then Curtis nodded. "Took you long enough," he said quietly. Franklin smiled, not out of pride, but because the man was right. He turned to Madeline. "You ever think about management?" Her eyes widened.
No.
"Not really." "Think about it," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." He looked around one last time. The store was still broken. But for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel hopeless. Franklin arrived at the Jefferson Street Bakery just after 6 the next morning, this time as himself. No disguise, no fake name. The sky was still gray, the sidewalks wet from a light rain overnight. Inside, the store lights were already on. Curtis was at the prep table, kneading dough with the quiet patience of someone who didn't expect help. He looked up when the door opened and immediately nodded. No surprise. No hesitation. Just recognition. Didn't think you'd show again, Curtis said. Franklin took off his jacket and hung it on a hook near the door. Neither did I. But we've got work to do. Curtis didn't ask questions. He just went back to folding the dough, his movements slow from the brace he hadn't replaced in months. Franklin washed his hands and stepped beside him, mimicking the folds. I've already called in a temporary team to help with cleanup and inventory, Franklin said. They'll be here in an hour. I want you off the line today. You're going to walk me through everything that's broken. Equipment, process, supply chain. Every gap. Curtis hesitated, then nodded once. You listening now? Franklin met his eyes. I am. By 7, the rest of the team began to arrive. Madeline walked in with a thermos tucked under her arm, hair pulled back, eyes cautious. She paused when she saw Franklin already behind the prep counter, apron dusted in flour. You're early, she said. I figured I'd try being useful for once, Franklin replied. She gave a short laugh, then looked around. Where's Ben? He's meeting with HR this morning. We're reviewing Melissa's case and a few things above her, too. Madeline stepped closer. What do you mean? She wasn't reporting to anyone. That doesn't happen without someone letting it slide. Madeline exhaled slowly, but didn't respond. She moved to the sink and started sanitizing the trays. Eli arrived not long after, still wearing the same oversized coat from the day before. He stopped in the doorway when he saw Franklin, unsure for a moment if he was in the right place. Franklin waved him in.
Morning.
You're not late. Eli walked to the register and set down his backpack without saying a word. I want you to work with me today, Franklin said. On inventory. You mentioned yesterday the system freezes up. I want you to show me when and how. Eli looked confused. Me? You know it better than I do. He blinked, then nodded. By 8:30, the temp crew had arrived, 2 from another location and 1 from a staffing agency they'd used before. Franklin directed them to begin deep cleaning the kitchen and checking expiration dates on the dry storage shelves. Curtis sat at a side table, clipboard in hand, noting which pieces of equipment were unreliable, which parts had been jury-rigged, and which ones hadn't been serviced in years. While Madeline handled the ovens, Franklin pulled Eli into the back office. The small room still smelled faintly of burned coffee and cheap air freshener. He sat at the desk while Eli stood awkwardly by the door. I read your file, Franklin said. You're not on probation or training anymore. You've been here almost a month. No infractions. First one in, last one out. That right? Eli nodded. I also saw the write-up Melissa gave you for attitude.
Know what that was about? Eli looked down.
She told me not to ask questions when she gave an order. I'd asked if I could wipe down the tables before starting window duty. She got mad. Franklin leaned back in the chair. You're not in trouble. I just need the truth. I didn't want to get anyone in trouble, Eli said. I just wanted to do a good job. You have been, Franklin replied. Starting today, that write-up is gone. And you're off counter duty for a while. I want you working with Curtis and me on systems. You've got good attention to detail. That's where we need you. Eli blinked, then gave a small nod. Back in the main room, Franklin found Madeline checking pastries in the display case. She was sorting out the ones that had dried out from sitting overnight. You ever do ordering? Franklin asked. She looked up.
Sometimes.
When Melissa was too busy or didn't want to. How accurate were the orders? Madeline hesitated. Not great.
She'd guess.
Some weeks we'd be short on flour. Other weeks we'd toss out produce that spoiled before we could use it. Franklin nodded. Then starting Monday, you'll take over ordering. We'll train you properly. You'll work with the supply team and follow our actual forecasting tools. Madeline blinked. I'm not a supervisor. You're someone who cares. That's more than most managers start with. She looked away for a moment, then back at him. What about the others? The ones who left. That's part of what I'm here to fix. By midday, Franklin had met with every employee in the store individually. Each one had a version of the same story: long shifts, no feedback, no pathway to grow. 2 former workers who'd left in the past month had even responded to outreach. One described being denied breaks. The other said she left after being told she was too anxious to work with customers after asking to stay in the back on a particularly bad day. Franklin documented everything. At 1 o'clock, he met with the district-level supervisor who was supposed to be overseeing the Jefferson location. A man in his 40s named Travis, dressed in a crisp button-down and polished shoes, arrived 20 minutes late. He walked in with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned. Franklin, he said, extending a hand. Heard you were digging around down here. What's this about? Franklin didn't shake his hand. You haven't visited this store in over 6 months, Franklin said. Travis gave a short laugh. It's a low-volume location. I let Melissa run it. She liked to keep things tight. She wasn't tight. She was unchecked. And you ignored multiple emails. Travis shrugged. Look, I've got 15 locations. I can't be everywhere. Franklin's tone didn't change. But you can respond to your boss. Or at least log store visits. We pulled the records. Nothing from you since December. Travis shifted in his seat. Is this a disciplinary meeting? This is termination, Franklin said. Travis blinked. You're firing me? You're being let go for negligence, policy violations, and failure to ensure a safe work environment within your district. Effective immediately. Travis stood up, clearly flustered. You're making a mistake. No, Franklin said. I made one. I trusted you. After Travis left, Franklin turned back to Ben, who had arrived during the meeting. I want a full audit of all stores in his region, Franklin said. Unannounced. Top to bottom.
Ben nodded.
Already in motion. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds just enough to cast a pale glow across the front windows. Inside, the bakery felt different. Not fixed, but breathing again. Franklin watched as Eli recalibrated the register, explaining each step to a new team lead from the flagship store. Madeline was walking the temp crew through labeling procedures. Curtis was sitting down with a rep for maintenance, discussing replacement parts for the laminator. Franklin stepped outside for a moment. The street was quiet. Across the road, a mother pushed a stroller, glancing briefly at the bakery window. She didn't go in, but she didn't walk past with a frown either. Back inside, Franklin called everyone to the front. I won't pretend this place is fixed overnight, he said. This will take time, but we're not going back to how things were. We're restructuring pay, shift schedules, and bringing in a staff trainer for support. You'll get real breaks, real feedback, and if you ever feel like something's wrong, you'll have a direct line to someone who'll listen. That starts now. No applause, just quiet nods. That was enough. Franklin looked at each of them, then added, and if any of you want to grow in this company, we'll make sure you get there with training, not threats. If you're willing to work, we're willing to invest. Curtis folded his arms, watching him closely. Sounds like you're finally running your father's business. Franklin didn't try to match the comment.
He just nodded.
We'll see, Curtis. We'll see. 3 weeks after Franklin removed Melissa and terminated the district supervisor, the Jefferson Street Bakery was still running on a lean crew, but the difference was clear. Not in speed or profits, those took time, but in how the air felt when you walked inside.
People spoke in full sentences now.
They laughed, occasionally. They made eye contact. Franklin had been back multiple times since that first undercover visit. Never unannounced, never in disguise. Each time, he stayed for hours, not as an observer, but as part of the shift. He rotated between stations, asked questions, and took notes. What he didn't do was make speeches. On a cold Thursday morning, he stepped inside just after opening. The bell above the door gave a soft ring, and Madeline, already behind the counter, looked up. "You're early again," she said, brushing her hands on her apron. "I'm told that's a good habit," Franklin said, stepping toward the coffee station. "You're opening now?" 3 days a week. I alternate with Jamal from the flagship location. He's training me on back-end scheduling too. Franklin nodded. He poured himself a black coffee and leaned on the counter. "You finding time to breathe?" Madeline gave a tired but genuine smile. "Barely. But it's different now. I know what's coming. I know who I'm working with. That helps." Franklin gestured toward the back. "Curtis in?" "He's meeting with the equipment vendor. They're testing the new dough mixer this morning." Franklin drained half his coffee in one go and stepped toward the kitchen. He found Curtis standing next to a tall man in a gray jumpsuit, both of them watching the machine hum through a cycle. Curtis looked over his shoulder. "Runs quieter than the one we had in '08. "I'll take that as a win," Franklin said. The technician gave a thumbs up. "Should be good to go. I'll leave the manuals behind. Call if it acts up." After the vendor left, Franklin approached the prep table where Curtis was wiping down the surface. "You sure about staying on?" Franklin asked. "I know you've carried a lot." Curtis didn't look up from the table. "I don't mind carrying it if I know it's going somewhere. Before, it felt like I was throwing buckets overboard on a sinking ship. Now I see a crew patching the holes." Franklin crossed his arms. "You've got 4 weeks of PTO saved up. You haven't touched it in over a year." Curtis gave a dry laugh. "You're telling me to take a vacation?" "I'm telling you to take time. We'll cover your shifts. You've earned a real break." Curtis looked at him, then gave a single nod. 2 weeks. After the new staff's trained. Deal. Back at the front, Franklin found Eli wiping the window ledge. He'd grown more comfortable in his role since moving off the register. He'd taken to documenting everything that broke or glitched, and even helped the IT team build a ticketing system for store-level tech issues. He didn't say much, but when he did, he didn't hesitate anymore. Franklin leaned beside him. "That inventory report you sent last night, nicely done. It flagged a restock error in the system. We're correcting it chain-wide." Eli didn't look up. "I just followed the worksheet Ben gave me." "Still, you caught it." Franklin paused. "You ever think about what you want to do long-term?" Eli hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "I don't know. I just like fixing things. Stuff that's broken." Franklin stepped back. "Keep doing that. Whether it's systems or people, we need more of that around here." As lunch hour approached, the store filled slowly. A couple of students, a woman with her toddler, a man in a high-vis vest grabbing coffee, and 2 croissants. The pace was calm. No one was rushing, but no one was stalling either. Franklin stepped aside as Madeline rang up an order and handed off a pastry to the toddler with a smile that didn't look forced. He waited until the lull between customers, then motioned her toward the hallway. "I want to ask you something," he said once they were out of earshot. "We've reopened the hiring process for the store manager position. Officially. But I've got someone in mind." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "You do?" "Yes," Franklin said. "And I'd like them to consider it. With full training, oversight, and a mentor from the regional team. They wouldn't be alone in it." Madeline didn't answer right away. She leaned against the wall, arms folded. "I don't know if I'm the right person for that. I've never managed anyone." "You've led people without the title," Franklin said. "That counts more." She glanced toward the front, where Eli was walking a customer through the difference between the 2 almond buns. "Okay," she said finally. "If I have support, and if I get to help pick the next assistant manager." "You will." That evening, Franklin held a private meeting in the back room. Just the core team, no temp staff, no visiting trainers. Curtis, Madeline, Eli, and 2 new hires who had been shadowing quietly for the past week. I want to be clear about something, Franklin said. What happened here won't be forgotten, but it also won't define this store. We're not sweeping anything under the rug, but we're not dragging it behind us either. The people who failed you are gone. The people who stepped up are the reason we're moving forward. He looked at each of them in turn. I don't expect perfection, but I will expect honesty. And if something's wrong, if someone's being mistreated or ignored, I want to hear it before it becomes a crisis. Curtis leaned forward. You planning to do this with the other stores too? Franklin nodded. Already started. One by one. We're not scaling up until we clean house. Eli raised his hand slightly. What if? What if it happens again? Someone like her? Then we act faster, Franklin said. There's 0 tolerance now. No exceptions. I won't let silence be policy again. As the meeting ended and the team filtered out, Franklin stayed behind a moment, standing in the quiet room. The walls hadn't changed. The ceiling tiles were still the same off-white. But the silence didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt earned. Later that night, after the store had closed and the lights dimmed, Franklin sat in his car across the street. He watched the last of the staff lock up. Madeline stepped outside, bundled in a coat, followed by Curtis and the 2 new hires. They stood on the sidewalk for a few minutes, chatting. No rush. No tension. Just people who had done a full day's work and didn't feel like they had to escape the building the moment the clock hit closing. Franklin didn't wave. He didn't get out. He just watched. When they finally dispersed, he started the engine and pulled into traffic. There would be more stores, more problems, more work. But this one, the one that nearly broke under the weight of silence and cruelty, was standing again. And this time it was standing on the right people.